And another wave of inmates are going to be released in a couple of hours now to make more space in prisons across England and Wales. Of course, it's part of the government's plans to tackle overcrowding in jails. And more are going to be let out in the coming months. But how does that feel for those affected by the prisoners released? Elizabeth Hudson's ex-husband has served just over 2 years for assaulting her. And she says an early release for him is going to hinder her chance to heal. Going to speak to Elizabeth in just a moment, but here's Gargi Patel with her story.
Britain's prisons are at bursting point. Last month, there was a record high of almost 89,000 prisoners in jail. The first round of releases saw around 1,700 prisoners set free early. This week will see an estimated 1,100 inmates let out as part of the controversial scheme. Elizabeth Hudson is a victim of domestic abuse. Her ex-husband Martin Underwood assaulted her and held a knife to her throat at their home in April 2021 before going on to assault a second victim while out on bail. In February 2023, the ex-army sergeant was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months. So far, he's served 2.5 years. Prisoners convicted of specific domestic abuse offences, such as coercive control, harassment and stalking, are not eligible for early release. But Underwood was charged with assault occasioning actual bodily harm and threats to kill. They're not crimes specific to domestic abuse. So he could be released as early as December. News that Elizabeth says has turned her life upside down again.
And Elizabeth is here. I mean, it seems like a total injustice that somebody guilty of the crimes against you could possibly be released early. But how did you feel as the victim, knowing that he could be out as early as Christmas?
I was incredibly shocked. I mean, the letter came totally out of the blue. I had no pre-warning. I mean, I'd heard the statements from the government that domestic abusers weren't going to be eligible for this. So I was kind of safe in my little bubble that I didn't have to think about it until next September. And then early September, I got this letter. And yeah, it just blew everything apart again.
Because if holding a knife to your throat isn't domestic abuse, I can't think what is. I mean, what a technicality that he's going to be let out on. It
makes no sense. No sense at all. There's no grey area in my case. It's absolutely domestic abuse.
Of course it is.
If I hadn't have escaped, I wouldn't be here now. It's that serious. Yeah. He then went on and attacked another partner in a domestic setting. There's no kind of confusion about what this is. No. It's domestic abuse, and really, really serious domestic abuse.
Can you talk us through, because you said that you thought you had until next September. Then a letter lands on your doorstep. What does that say?
Due to the government's overcrowding of prisons, the SDS 40 scheme is being brought in, and this means that MU will be eligible for early release. And that's basically... he'll be released in June and possibly in December under home detention curfew. But I still don't know whether it's December or June.
Right. So you don't even know if you have a period of, probably in your mind, safety until June next year or around Christmas this year, or beginning of December, you could start to worry. And now, how are you feeling? What's that anxiety like?
It's horrible. I mean, I should expect, after you've been through something like that, I've had lots of therapy for PTSD and all kinds of trauma, and I've worked really, really hard to get to a stronger, better place, and this has derailed that somewhat.
Did the letter say, did it give any, apart from notifying you, did it give you any lines of support? Did it give you any idea that you could, I don't know, challenge it, that you could talk to somebody about it, if you needed help, that you could, you know, ring a helpline, or that you could even say, actually, I don't feel safe, I want to say this isn't okay?
No, there's no method to question it. There was an option to call the probation service and ask about things like exclusion zones.
OK.
So you can request an exclusion zone. However, that requires you revealing where you live, obviously, because you need to say where the exclusion zone is. So that obviously doesn't work for a huge number of domestic abuse.
So you didn't trust that if you told the probation service that information that's critical to your safety would be kept protected?
Oh, no, I think they'd protect that, but then they couldn't put an exclusion zone in and say, you're not allowed to go in this certain area to him, because then that would tell him...
It reveals him the area where you are.
And he would, and given his record, he's perfectly capable of breaking the exclusion zone. See, what strikes me listening to this conversation is that you just don't matter, do you? As far as this equation is concerned. The government, they just don't care about people like you. You're just not part of the thinking. You're sort of an afterthought and a complete irrelevance. It's not your fault that the prisons are overcrowded.
No.
It's got nothing to do with you. No. And yet the guy who did this to you is coming out way ahead of time. And I guess people watching might say, well, if you knew he was coming out in September, which, you know, isn't that far away, what difference does it make in coming out at Christmas? It's about your adjustment, isn't it? It's about you preparing yourself.
I think what people don't understand in this, they talk a lot about safety, and absolutely that's right that we talk about victim safety. However, what's missing for victims is the fact that if you've been in an abusive relationship, you've walked on eggshells, you've changed your behaviour, you've felt controlled, and then you have this period of peace, this period of freedom where you can walk around and you're not looking over your shoulder, and that's incredibly precious, incredibly precious. But you know it's over, you know there's a time frame on that, but for them to just reduce that ridiculously is so unbelievably cruel, actually.
And what about the other aspect of this? Punishment. I mean, you must have derived a degree of grim satisfaction that he was actually being punished and being kept in jail for a reasonable amount of time. A lot of people would have said he should have got longer, but anyway, we are where we are. And that punishment's now being withdrawn.
Yeah. I mean, what message does it send to other perpetrators?
Abusers.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the government talks about violence against women, let's treat it as seriously as terrorism, let's halve the amount of violence against women, and then they put policies in place that give a message that actually it's not all that important. We don't need to kind of make this #1 priority.
We're going to speak to the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. Of course, she's the person responsible. If you could sit there and speak to her directly, what would you say?
Well, for a start, I'd ask her to respond to my letter. I wrote a letter and I've received no response, not even a holding response.
What did you say?
I outlined the whole details of the case, the fact that in his second attack to his partner, it was non-fatal suffocation and non-fatal strangulation, which are offences that they've listed as being excluded.
As domestic abuse.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, that hasn't been flagged. I've CC'd in people like Jess Phillips, Yvette Cooper, Lord Timpson. Nobody has responded.
That's extraordinary. I mean,
when did you send those letters?
It's well over a week ago and I've received nothing.
Not even an acknowledgement, and we'll get back to you?
No.
And that's a letter, not an email?
No, that was an email. That was by email.
Right.
Yeah.
OK, so we can't blame the post for
No,
that. You literally send an email.
No, I've had the automated response to say that it's been received. I've had that. So we know that it's in the system, but for whatever reason, they didn't feel that it was important
so the
enough
first question is, why have you not responded to the letter? In the letter, what have you asked the Justice Secretary to address? The specifics of this case, but also, presumably, why aren't you treating more offences as domestic abuse?
Yeah, I've asked that they put systems in place where all offences that are domestic abuse offences are registered as such. So we don't just put things down like ABH, we register it as this is a domestic abuse offence.
And presumably that's easy to establish as a domestic abuse offence because it involves violence against your partner or an ex-partner.
Yeah. Or even another option I put in the letter was, don't let anybody out whose offence has resulted in a restraining order to protect the victim.
Yes,
and that's this case.
That's really a very, very simple thing.
Just for the purposes of our interview with the Justice Minister, where exactly did this attack, the knife attack, take place?
In where we used to live in South Yorkshire.
And what room of the house?
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen. Couldn't be a more domestic environment, could it?
No.
So it was an attack in the kitchen of your family, your personal home.
Yeah.
Got it. OK.
I'm so sorry for what's happened. I find it absolutely extraordinary that the government can say that domestic abusers are excluded from early release when the facts of the matter are right in front of us, literally personified by your case. We'll put those questions to the Justice Secretary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in, and good luck.
And just, if he comes out in December, what will you do? What do you do?
Well, I've put everything in place that I can put in place. And, you know, I have a lifetime restraining order.
Right.
So I do what I've always done. I crack on.
Crack on?
Well, I thought you were going to say, I'll trust the system, but...
Absolutely not.
You can do that, can you?
No.
Elizabeth, it's really interesting to talk to you.
Yeah.
And all our good wishes and sympathies to you.
Yeah.
Nightmare for you. Well, look, a spokesperson for the Ministry of Justice told this programme that the new government inherited a prison system on the point of collapse, and it's been forced to introduce this early release programme to stop a crisis that would have overwhelmed the criminal justice system. Offenders released under the scheme are subject to strict conditions. Well, they say that, but, I mean, we know that quite a few people who were released a few weeks ago and were meant to be electronically tagged weren't.